So to warm up, rubbing your hands together and tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Onto one shoulder, arm. Upper part of your chest. Your belly. And your legs. Sitting back in the chair. As always, as the weather gets colder, the physical warm-up is, I suppose, in a sense, more important to actually raise your body temperature, improve your circulation, and just take that chill off the body. I know we're indoors and we haven't had to go out to get the class, but even so, as the colder weather comes in, we do tend to sort of contract inwards. But remember also that the principles behind the Tai Chi posture do tend to counteract that, do encourage a kind of openness and a spaciousness. So I think just a little bit more attention to details like your weight drop back in the chair with your feet out. That's a fairly straightforward process, but can be surprisingly difficult. You might find yourself just sitting back in the chair and even notice, oh, it's nice and relaxed. Little things, you might find you're holding your neck tight, your jaw tight. Sometimes thumbs and fingers, thumbs in particular might be sort of like stiff for no good reason. And this is the thing, that tightness, that tension can often get just held in the body, and we don't realize it because we become habituated to it. Just feel the change in your body as you also remember the habit of rooting down, of releasing that tightness and that stiffness, which builds up for us when we practice an art like Tai Chi. Feel the effect on your breathing, your chest, your shoulders, wherever else you notice any change in your body. And at the same time, just recognizing that the awareness that we bring to the body does have this effect on encouraging our thoughts, or allowing our thoughts just to settle. Not quite so sort of all over the place, thinking about one thing and then another and so on and so forth. And you find this sense of calmness, of stillness. Then, disturbing that as much as possible, maintaining that, just bring your feet in, come to the position on the chair, forwards in the chair, if you can, angling your body forwards. So if you imagine the square formed by your feet and your hips at the corners, if I was sitting right back and had this actual upright position here, shoulders in line with hips and so on, I would also be sitting right at the edge of that square. And it feels uncomfortable. You would have a sense of the space behind you, and your body would automatically sort of try and pull you away from that space. On the other hand, if we tilt forward slightly to here, then we can still imagine a straight line going down. And there's two things really. I've demonstrated this standing. Let me get a pole. So I'm standing, just to compare the postures here, like this. You can see the pole represents the midline of my body in this posture, from the crown of the head down to a point more or less behind the balls of my feet, but it would be here, but I can't make it work there. My belly gets in there. So that's the standing posture. When we do it seated, it's slightly different, and there are really two things to consider. One is this here, that there is still that line there. So when we move forwards and backwards, we're still connected to an upright quality, an imagined upright quality. The other thing to think about is this line through here. That when, for instance, when I go forwards, I don't do this. I do this. See how the line moves with me. So we still have a kind of geometric pattern. I often describe these lines as like grid lines on a map. So if you look at most maps, they have grids, and you go to A1 or something like that. And those grids those lines don't exist in the landscape around you. You could go to a field and look for that line, and it wouldn't be there. But you could still use that line to help you navigate across the field because it gives you a sense of orientation. So think about that as you sit here. If you find that in this position your back's beginning to stiffen up, then sit back and initially just try the lower part of your back against the chair. If you need at any point to sit right back and give your back a proper rest, then do that. But if you can be forwards, then it's easier to feel the weight in your feet. So these are things that we want to have kind of in front of us as what we're moving towards, but we also need to know where we're moving from. And if your back's saying to you, I don't need to do that today, then listen to your back. That's important. And there's all sorts of reasons why that might be the case. If you've just been out, for instance, and you've still got some of that chill, your back might just feel a little bit stiffer than normal, and so on and so forth. But just sit for a moment and imagine those straight lines, the square formed by your feet and your hips, the upright and the angled line. And just have a sense that it's like a three-dimensional map with these lines there to guide you as you sort of move with that sense of the inner landscape of the body. And then just slowly turning your head. I mean, again, I would emphasize there are no straight lines in your body. We're curvy. Nice smooth movement, being careful not to put pressure on the side of your neck. And again, listen to your body. How far can you move without that tightening, that gripping? Don't just assume that you can do what you did last time or even this morning. And then hands in front of your shoulders. So looking for an ongoing awareness of what's happening within your body. And never forcing anything. I mean, if we're truly exploring the inner landscape of the body, and we've got this idea of a map, and if you were walking across that field and there was a path there on the map, and you walked along, and suddenly there was a big muddy puddle, you wouldn't just necessarily go straight on. You might walk around the puddle, and in the same way, in particular areas of stiffness and tightness, going forwards now, are things to just be respectful of, to move around, just allow the movement time to kind of break up that blockage or whatever it is. Hands down to your sides. Notice changes not just in your arms and your hands, but going into your chest, your upper back, maybe down your sides as well. Winding around. Back the other way. Rest your hands, easing forwards and using your feet to push you back. So if we do this with that image of that line that I showed you a few moments ago, then another thing we can build into this is that in this forwards position, your hips are sinking back. It's almost like somebody very gently takes hold of your head and pulls a little bit. So there's this feeling of your spine just lengthening out. And so the feeling in the spine is that the spine expands and contracts, the spaces between the vertebrae expanding and contracting, giving you this pulsing, massaging quality up and down your spine and your back. Turn a little bit. So now going for one side. Feel the contrast between the leg that you're moving into when the weight is in it to the other leg. The full leg is the one with the weight in, the empty leg. It's quite a subtle difference, but there is a difference nevertheless. And then in the other direction. Turning in your hips, your pelvis rolling around on the chair, bringing your head and shoulders around a nice smooth circle. And this feeling, the image that I've used sometimes is your spine like a plant floating in water. And that's achievable as long as you're careful about the movement. Here, when I go this far, I can feel, yeah, that's a possibility. But the more I go out there, the more I'm having to stiffen and to tighten in my body to stop myself falling out of the chair. Go back the other way. Good. And then that's about 2/3 of your weight back in your hips. About plant your foot down and just see if you can apply gentle pressure. So you're just pushing your foot down into the floor a little bit. When you do that, I've used this image that it's like you're pushing into soft sand or you're paddling in the sea and you're just being firm with your foot in. But in fact, it's a hard floor. beneath you. So actually what you're looking to do is to just soften slightly in the sole of your foot, the ball of your foot, the toes, so that rather than this kind of hard, stiff quality, just a little bit of give in the foot. And then on the other side. Obviously, the shoes are going to make a difference to that, but actually, we often, I don't know about you, I sometimes find my way on myself walking down the road, and I suddenly realise that for some reason, even sitting down, my toes have sort of like ripped inwards. Why am I doing that? All I'm doing is creating tension in my foot. There's no requirement to do that. And then hands and fingers do that as well. Sometimes we find ourselves or we see people and they're just standing chatting and their fingers are a bit tight. Like that is that like, almost like claws sometimes. So we begin to notice those things in Tai Chi. We still experience them, and we learn to release them. So there, if it's the fingers, like there, if it's the toes. Oh, hold on, I don't need my toes gripping inwards. It's like I can actually feel that contact with the ground. Now, hands down to your sides. Turn your palms forwards. Bird folds its wings forwards with your weight. And back. But your arms still hanging down from your shoulders. Think of that center line that I showed you. And you're going forwards from it and maybe a little bit backwards. It wouldn't be much backwards, wouldn't be much forwards, to be honest. The term we use to describe that central position in Tai Chi is central equilibrium. And if you could imagine that pole as being like a mooring post in the sea with a boat tied to it, the boat will drift away from the pole, but the rope will stop it being lost. And it ended up on the rocks. So you go forward, there's only so far you can go before you could either put it in terms of losing that connection, or maybe just kind of stiffening up and tightening up. And, you end up going back one way or another. This time, don't rotate your hands, sit back, your arms swing down and then out, feeling the change in your back and your chest. Fisherman cast net. Notice that my hands describe a very shallow curve. At this point, when my arm is straight down, my arm will actually feel very heavy. And again, we notice changes in the body. Primary driver is always going to be our weight transfer here. But there are other movements that we notice, the expansion, the contraction, the changes in the upper part of our body that are part of the transmission of that fundamental drive, that basic energy coming from the weight transfer through the rest of the body. Imagine the ball behind your arms this time. So without you having to strain to lift your arms, and just get drawn up and over. What you are using your muscles for, it's not a strain, but muscles of your arms and shoulder, is to maintain this position of your arms relative to your back your sides until you get to here. This time, as you come up, turn your hands palm in, feel your chest opening as you go into pigeon, spreads its wings, pressing in gently. Try and engage your chest and your upper back as part of this movement. One thing that can help with that is if you imagine in this position, there's a big ball between your arms, and what you're doing is you're trying to squeeze the ball in. So it's not just your arms that are doing that, it's the whole of your upper body. This time, once again, changing, just your elbows going out a little bit to draw your hands back and then pushing away. And punch with both fists. Remember, your fingers are loosely rolled in, feeling the space within your fist. Don't hold tight because you'll stiffen up in your wrists and your elbows, and that tension will go right back into your shoulders. This time, when you get forwards, uncurl your fingers, turn your hands out. Each of these movements, there's a lot of similarity to all the other movements, topped with just the individual patterns associated with a particular exercise. Going back to the idea of the inner landscape, there's the main pathways, but then a whole network of joining pathways crisscrossing the field. Good. And then hands palm down, polishing the table. So one of our roles, I suppose, one of the roles of our awareness is to become aware of that network of small paths, directions, and to try and just work out which ones are beneficial and which ones aren't. We're not trying to expel the ones that aren't. It might prove beneficial in the future, but we are trying to put the main focus of our attention in the ones that we know that at the moment are working for us. One more time. And your hands palm up. And again, pushing up. See if you can feel again that sense of a lengthening through your spine that I described earlier where we were tilting forwards. A little bit more difficult in the vertical position, the upright, the more upright position, I should say. But still possible, and therefore still possible to feel the sort of slight, almost tingling feeling, or however you experience it, of the echo of the movement, moving up and down your spine and back. One more time. Change into the wild goose, hands out to your sides. And parting the clouds. Last time, coming back to that central position, your hands drop straight down from your shoulders. And then the next expansion is on one side of your body, pushing your arm up. And at the top, you wind around again, a hollow fist there. And you've got holding something delicate in it. Pull down. Dragon plucks the stars from the sky. Still in the back of your mind, that grid pattern, that mechanical alignment between your feet, your hips, and your shoulders. One more on each side. Change both hands now. One movement, pressing up again. That nice long feeling movement up and down through your back. and then pressing out. One more round. Scooping the sea and looking at the sky. Remember your hips dropping back. That's the counterbalance to this movement that stops you falling forwards. And that helps to draw you back to the outside. If I didn't keep my hips back, if I did this and I rolled forward, you can see I'm suddenly, and now it's quite difficult to get out of the chair. But with my hips back like this, I've got that lengthening through my spine, and that can help me with that drawing back up. The push from the foot as well. The combination of that and that expansion up through my body, so on and so forth, makes it coming back to the upright stance much easier. And then hands fisted, grasping the tiger's ears. Switch legs, starting with scooping the sea, looking at the sky. And changing. So actually grasping the tiger's ears with this movement up through the back and arms coming up if possible, above shoulder height for once. It doesn't happen very often. The combination is it's quite a sort of energetic, vibrant feel, refreshing feel in your back and spine. Once more. Good, and bring your feet down. Rubbing your hands together. And tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Shoulder. And your arm. The other side. Upper part of your chest. belly. Legs. Your heel was up, and all the muscles of your legs gently working. Going around. Back the other way. And rest. Okay, and then standing. So when we stand, again, I'll show you with the pole. There's the ball of my foot, so I'm just slightly behind there. Again, it would obviously be in the middle. And when I stand like this, you can see the alignment roughly from the crown of my head down to the rest of my body to the ground. And then when I start to just rock my weight forwards and backwards, see how I go away from that pole. I can go to about here, and I'm quite comfortable, knees are soft and so on and so forth. I go a little bit further, suddenly I'm moving away from the pole. So again, that can be a useful image. The intent is not to sort of always be in that alignment. We know that from certain of the exercises. And in any case, even if we wanted that to happen, it's not going to. You've only got to walk outside and walk on the road a bit, and then one pavement will slope that way, another one would do that. For all sorts of reasons, where we're coming offline, and it's just life, really. But what we learn to do is to bring ourselves back. So this is a useful exercise. It can be done. It can be helped really by giving yourself some support, because there's quite a lot of trial and error in this exercise. And yeah, the thing is, with trial and error, you're going to get things wrong sometimes. The thing is, if you get this wrong, then that can happen. It doesn't help really, but what you can do is you get tenure. You're stopping yourself, and you can just investigate this position. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes I might be here and I'm feeling as though I'm falling forward. If I can just soften a bit more in my hips, suddenly I've come more or less back to the upright. And that's a useful thing to recognize as a possibility, because actually what happens is when we go out in the pavement slopes and I'm about to fall over, we know that the hips dropping back can help us. When I did this, I placed the pole behind the ball of my foot. That might not be comfortable. So anywhere from about here in terms of the foot, the ball of the foot, to about here. You don't want it back there. Once you're back there, you're already kind of being pulled backwards. So somewhere in the front half of your foot. And this time, start from weight in your heel, going forward, reach that point, and what we do again, I'll show you with the pole. So just watch, carry on with the rocking, but watch. I'm back here. I go forwards. There's my alignment with the pole. Instead of going forwards now, I let my hips drop back, and so I'm staying in line, and the movement has changed from a vertical to a horizontal, from a horizontal to a vertical movement. I beg your pardon. So see if you can get a sense of that. Bring your hands around like you're cradling the ball. Go forwards to reach that feeling of you know, the position of equilibrium. And let your hips sink back. And changing the movement to the vertical. Again, remember that sensation of movement up and down your spine. Whole body expanding and contracting. Nice and easy, gently. You can imagine it's almost like here, I'm kind of sliding up and down the pole when I do this. Well, that's a slightly odd image, but we can use all sorts of different ideas and images. Some will resonate with you, some won't. So rooting down. Do one more of these. Change to the wild goose. And part in the clouds. Good. And just give your legs a little bit of a shake. 1 foot forwards. Hip width across your feet. Going to about 60% of your weight in your front foot. Maybe up to 17 in your back foot. I'll show you this with the pole. You see, it's moving with me. And it's not quite going to reach the ball of my foot at the moment. It's not quite going to reach that position in either direction. But if I do it from the front and I hold this pole in front of me, you can see, a bit closer, you can see the direction that it takes. It's from here to here. Think of that line that it's on. And as you go back, you raise your toes. You can turn the front foot out a little bit. And then when you go forward, you let the back knee come in. And so what happens with this pole as we do that, I'm holding it there. You notice when my back heel comes up, look where it goes to. And come back here. As soon as I raise my toes, you see where it's heading to? And eventually I want it to be there and there. It's again, that's slightly false. It didn't quite make the back foot because it's not going through the middle of my body. We imagine it going through the middle of my body. So you can have that vision, that image of the pole. And if that helps you, again, we have these grid lines almost, these lines, and we're moving with an awareness of that. Stepping in. Again, not all of these ideas and images are going to work for you. So if I say something and it doesn't work, don't sort of think, oh, I must understand that. What I would do in circumstances like that is I'd kind of file it away, think, well, it doesn't really make sense. But I've learned over the years that sometimes something that doesn't make sense this week, maybe next week or next year or something like that, suddenly, oh, actually, I do get what's going on there. So, and then on the other side, and sometimes, you know, there might be an idea or an image that you've used or I've suggested that worked for a while, but then ceased to be useful. Don't get too attached to these ideas. They're there to help us progress in the movement and to train our awareness of the movement. Raising your toes and your hips. And then stepping. And step through. And going back. Have your right foot forward. To start with fisherman cast a net. The other thing about this center line is that that's the line that we turn around. It's like the axle of a wheel. This time when you sink back, you turn around that axle. Your arms swing out, the wind blows the willows. And again, just bringing your heel up and toes. Building up into, once again, just bringing the foot in your own time. When you're bringing the foot in, you can do this. You can put the toes down just to keep your stability. If you fancy it, you can try just raising your knee. Oops, I had a little wobble then. That will happen sometime. You can even try raising your knee and rotating the leg at the same time. It's each of those movements is quite difficult. Raising, this can really throw your posture out. So don't sacrifice your posture just to get fancy with the movement. And if you're finding, again, you saw me angle there. If you're finding this is quite difficult, then the thing to do is to practice it separately and shake out. So if you see something like that and you think, well, I'd like to do that, but then you go to do it and you're like, oh, I can't do it. What you do is you again support yourself because you're doing something quite difficult, and then you think, well, okay, what happens when I do this? And you might find, oh, I'm tensing up there, and then you find a way of not tensing up there, and so on and so forth. You analyze it, and you use that awareness that I've been talking about. And then you think, well, okay, now I'll rotate. And then you realize you're stiffening somewhere else. And so you think about how you can do that rotation. You break the movement down, you explore the different components of it, and then you bring it back together. So with your left foot forwards now, fisherman cast a net. And then sinking back and turning. Raising your toes and your heel. Just do, stop at whatever point you think, oh yeah, this is as far as I want to go today. Or actually, you might even think, sometimes I do, I step in and I think, yeah, I like that. I want to explore each stage of it. You don't necessarily have to go the full distance, as it were. If you wanted to, remember, you can raise your knee, rotate. And then step through. Dragonfly skims the water. When you run out of space, step in the other direction. And bring your feet down. Go back to your chair. So that was quite technical. And there is this technical side, as I describe it, to Tai Chi, knowing the grid lines and that kind of thing. But try not to see that as somehow separate to the other things, because the notion of the grid lines can give you an awareness of how your body is in line or not. And if you can improve the alignment of your body, the quality of your movement will improve. And sometimes, again, if you're doing an exercise and it doesn't feel quite right, it's like, why this doesn't seem to be flowing or something like that. And you'll see me sometimes when I'm teaching, there'll just be a sense it's not quite right, and I'll have a go to realize that I put a foot down in the wrong place or something like that, and I'll just make a little adjustment. So don't see this kind of technical aspect and what you might call a more intuitive aspect as being separate from each other. They weave in and out of each other, like everything else in Tai Chi. Just let your arms drop down again, and then embrace tiger, return to mountain. The strong emphasis here on that returning process, as always, coming back to an awareness of central equilibrium and all that's involved in that. Phrases like seeking the stillness within the movement. Be still as a mountain, move like a great river. Again, they don't contradict each other. We don't say seek the stillness or the movement. It's seek the stillness within the movement. We don't say be still as a mountain or move like a great river. It's be still as a mountain, move like a great river. They're paired qualities. But the emphasis may change, and the emphasis here is on coming back to that stillness. Very deliberately so at the end of a session. And this gives us the chance to just let whatever we've learned in the class to soak in, rather than having to think, oh, well, he was doing that with his leg and that with his arm and that. Just let your body sort of absorb the lesson, as it were. And then rest. And just open your eyes. Lovely. Thank you very much. Interesting class, I hope. Yeah. Different perspectives on the